get incense all over everywhere.
Yay. Hi, Elise.
Hello. Hi, Ursula. How are you?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wax Hermetic, part of the Cafe C series on Astromegistus. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're continuing our third installment of our We Heart Pluto conversation. And today, we'll be focusing on the natal chart and therefore the energetic imprint and the circumstances around Pluto's untimely or possibly premeditated demotion from being the ninth and final planet in our solar system to being what is now considered a dwarf planet.
Mm-hmm.
Super sus. This is very suspect, and
Yes.
what we didn't think was so much going to be as controversial of a topic as it as kind of the astrology of it seems to be indicating that there may be something really nefarious or certainly something premeditated around power dynamics, wealth, that kind of thing, control, and forces outside of one's control. All very Plutonian topics, themes.
Do you have your bell, Elise? Do you want to ring us in and then
I
we'll get
do. Thank you
started?
for reminding me. Yes, we have our ritual bell, and this is to indicate that we have started the ritual.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're
Oh, man.
welcome. So I was thinking what we could do for today, since we
Mm-hmm.
kind of dedicated this whole part 3 to this topic. Because we didn't get to it last week and we felt like it deserved its own episode. Let's
Yes.
kind of set the stage and go back in time. I have some
Okay.
notes here as far as what was going on the day that this happened.
Okay.
And then we can kind of dive a little bit more deeply into this topic was actually your idea originally. So
Right.
you had some thoughts around it as well. And then we can look at the chart and see where your theories and suspicions are actually have a lot of base.
Okay. Thank
Based
you.
on when
I
we
love
look at your
that. I'm
chart.
like,
Yeah.
evidential evidence. Let's go. Like,
Yes.
amazing.
All right. So I'll go through kind of what was happening on this day in 2006.
Okay. Ooh,
And then
before you start
ahead.
that, can I just like throw in there why I threw this out as a topic very early
Yeah.
on in our devising of what Wax Hermetic was going to discuss? My major, and because our entire goal here is to have conversations around both the destruction of and ways to implement the resurrection of the temple being kind of, we refer back to the temple of Demeter at Eleusis, and all places in the world and throughout history where spirit, the intuitive arts, divine feminine practices were not just, allowed to exist, but rather institutional power that of their own. They had their own agency, their own sovereignty, because it was a recognized aspect of our existence here on Earth and in the continuum. That needed to be recognized. And so places in history where we saw those things eliminated or demoted or swept under the rug, or, and the information and wisdom passed down in these places of intuitive arts, initiation, spiritual practice, are more than likely to separate us from a greater knowingness and integration, both in our individual selves and with our collective, humanity and our relationship to greater intelligence and existence beyond. So my overall thing about Pluto being the planet that rules the soul's will, as opposed to Mars, which really rules the ego's will. The fact that it never is lost on me to the fact that in the modern conversation as to whether or not spirituality is like a thing, and whether or not the soul exists as things get continuously more, secular, and just we're kind of just forced into a left brain concept of existence and significance and purpose and how to go about things, and what constitutes something as being fact versus something being fantasy, that kind of thing. It is never lost on me how much time and energy is wasted in the modern conversation as to whether or not the soul exists, or actually rather taking Pluto as part of our solar system. The demotion of Pluto, first off, most people don't believe in astrology or follow astrology in the modern day. There's reasons for that. Again, the destruction of the temple. But in the modern context, it was like during a very philosophical time and a time of philosophical expansion, that was actually a part of the power system at the time, because Pluto in Sagittarius means an expansion of these things, things on the greater horizon, and, in education, philosophy, X, Y, and Z. All of a sudden, Pluto, the planet that rules the soul's will, gets demoted, and people, instead of considering whether or not what Pluto represents, i.e. the soul, its existence, and the fact that it has a very defined will of its own and game plan for us overall, people are missing the kind of reflective, what it represents, the soul, whether or not that exists. And instead, we're just kind of having this like, what do you call that, when we're kind of getting lost on the semantics of it, about talking about whether or not Pluto is a planet or not, because of its size and because of its distance and because of its relationship to the greater whole. So we're kind of like taking back what could have been like the conversation that needs to happen, I would say, overall, which is like, are we accounting for the soul and its actuality? Are we accounting for the actuality of spirit? And are we integrating that into our individual selves, into our societal collective X, Y, and Z? Instead, we're taken right back to this very left brain kind of, like very, I don't want to say just inane, kind of, just almost like devoid of like real meaning, kind of like semantics issue. So that is what I really wanted to press home here in terms of the conversation of Pluto's demotion. But like you said, and like I think you are going to reveal to us, what the astrology around Pluto's actual demotion from a planet to a dwarf planet in our solar system, what kind of energetic imprint, what kind of energetic dynamics were happening around that particular decision. So
yeah, absolutely. So, and before we dive into today, I want to invite everyone so this is a 3-part series. Parts 1 and parts 2 are all about what Pluto means and Pluto's myth and story, respectively. So I invite everyone, if you're catching this at part 3, please go back for reference to parts 1, which was on November 12th of this year of 2025, and then part 2 on the 21st of this year, I believe, or the 19th, whatever, 7 days ago. So I'm getting a little lost, but they're incremental and in order as far as parts 1 and parts 2, and now we're talking about this today. So there is more context as far as what we've been building up to for today's discussion.
yes,
for reference and review in the past 2 episodes from our show.
Indeed. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so it was August 24th, 2006, when this happened, at a meeting of the International Astronomical Union, the IAU, in Prague, Czech Republic. And they specifically convened to reclassify Pluto as not a planet any longer. So this was, again, here we just start off the bat with a 3-letter organization, which automatically says cloaked in secrecy to me and some kind of suspicion that's going on. So there's that.
And it's a union. It's not just
yes.
A group. It's not just an organization. It's a union. They're united in whatever it is that they decide to do.
Exactly. So they have.
Wait, can I also just say that they were the IAU, the International Astronomical Union, also was formed in 1919, the same year that the World Series was rigged, allegedly by Arnold Rothstein.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So even more history that goes into this.
Yeah.
Okay. So based on what the research that we did, we uncovered that this time period in 2006 was marked by significant events that reflected broader issues of centralized control, manipulation, and the erosion of personal liberties. So politically, we had the Iraq War going on. There was a lot of controversy around that, if you remember, if you were alive during that time. If not, go back and research. But we had other international institutions like the UN and NATO involved in the militarization, the consolidation of power, the influence on global politics. So we had all of that going on politically. And then here in the United States, we had growing concern over government surveillance programs. This was the time that Edward Snowden blew the whistle on everything that they're doing as far as the privacy violations that were going on at the time that most people weren't even aware of then. So that was happening in 2006 at the time. Economic and financial issues that were going on. The housing bubble was about to burst. So when Elise and I first started talking about this, we were like, oh, that was right before 2008. So there's interesting things that go on as we kind of, talk about these last couple years of right before when this happened, right before 2008.
Right.
So we had the economic downturn that exposed the vulnerabilities of centralized banking systems and dangers of unchecked corporate power. We had increasing calls for transparency in the financial markets. Remember Occupy Wall Street and all of that whole movement that started happening after this.
Right.
Looking at, financial systems in general, the markets, honest money systems such as gold and silver, which have become obsolete or had become obsolete at that point in time. They are starting to make a comeback. Environmental concerns, we had things like climate change was starting to become an issue, GMOs, industrial agriculture, and we had kind of cover-ups, I guess you could say, or downplaying of this happening in the media, which we'll also talk about when we get into the chart. So there was just a lot of covering up or not smoothing over, but I guess downplaying the importance of organic farming and allowing people to grow their own food, home food production, natural health practices. So there was a lot of that going on health-wise at the time. Cultural and social shifts. The internet was becoming more ubiquitous. So like Facebook was gaining traction, the technologies that were connecting us globally also raised concerns about privacy. So we had that happening. The power of big tech was growing at that point in time. There were increased calls for alternative media sources that could provide a more balanced and honest perspective on global events. So the confluence and influence of corporate media was also kind of getting stronger and stronger at this point in time. And then we look at the health and wellness industry. Pharmaceutical industry was getting more powerful, but also becoming more scrutinized by people for taking over, or I guess pulling people more to pharmaceuticals rather than natural healing and health practices and holistic practices. That's also something interesting that was happening at this time. So in summary, in 2006, on August 24th, it was a time of significant transition and tension, where many of the issues that are central to alternative perspectives were beginning to become more important to the people, but more censored and kind of put and swept under the rug by the consolidation of the powers that be.
Right.
Yeah. And I do remember when I went through and kind of started looking at all this, I was like, oh yeah, that was happening. That was happening. It was very, very, very interesting to kind of reflect on that time period. And then when we looked at the chart, which we'll do next after, I know you want to say stuff about what I just read to everybody. When we look at the chart, it gets more interesting. So go ahead.
Oh, I'm also just thinking of the year numerology of 2006 being an 8 year, and 8 is all about power, karma, and money, and the kind of like cyclic relationship between those things. I, being an 8 life path, know a lot about just the dynamics of an 8 year. So in any case, that it being an 8 year to me means that it's really about all of those things. It's about wealth, power, and karma. And the need, when I think of the the number 8, I always think of it as an infinity symbol, you know, termed upright.
Yes.
And so when I think of the 8 when it's upright, I very much think of it as like an hourglass of like, you can see when the time is like running out and then it like flips over. And then when I think of it in terms of the infinity symbol, I think of it as being like the only way that you can balance the spiritual, you know, or the esoteric with the, you know, physical and the pragmatic, you know, is understanding that they're a mirror of each other. So anything that is like gained or done in the other world that doesn't like show up in the other one, you know, like if they're not balanced, then you failed, and like the hourglass will actually run out in more time, you know what I'm saying, than like what the natural like cycles of timing and things, you know, being seen from both sides will have. Like yeah, it's a great place to really gain power, but also shoot yourself in the foot if you don't do it properly or don't account for both sides. So
interesting. And we have some comments from people that are watching that kind
ooh,
of touch
okay.
on that. So hello, Chris. Thanks for joining us, Chris Mack. And then, so we have some questions that are sort of off topic for today. So if we have time at the end, we'll get to these. What's Pluto going through someone's 6 look like and that kind of thing.
Yes.
But this one, yes. So Chris, we will get to that momentarily.
Yeah, that's a great
great segue.
Comment. Great segue. Yeah, let's put Chris's comment up here. So Chris Mack says, did Pluto's demotion lead to the financial collapse and the downstream effects we see today with rampant inflation, currency manipulation, and contracting of American power projection? I would say yes. And interestingly enough, I think it's time to put the
let's pull up the chart.
Let's pull out the chart, because one of the things that is very noticeable and something, because I was not really working, and I think I was in college still at the time that this was happening.
I was working and can share.
So I wasn't in the corporate world yet, but the thing that now I have worked in the corporate world that I think of is the fact that while Pluto was still in this expansive, enthusiastic, foreign focused, you know, Pluto of the like, and because it was in Sagittarius still, that what was in the pipeline, because we always have things working, you know, in the pipeline of what is coming next. It was like the rest of the world was still focused on the foreign horizons, the foreign policy, the foreign goings on, while the actual consolidation of power was the thing that was in the pipeline by way of institutions locally. And they were starting it with things that had been garnered by our kind of focus globally, right? So that's what I would say. So I would say overall, yes, Chris. The answer to that is yes. And we'll be further delineating or analyzing the actual chart of Pluto's demotion, so that you can be the judge as to what it is that you're seeing or not seeing in terms of
Yeah.
a possible correlation, if not causation, between these two things.
Yeah. And I just want to say too that I think that we actually have the correct time for this,
Oh,
or at least in the
fantastic.
correct time frame, because last week's chart, we shared Pluto's discovery chart, and we just arbitrarily made it a Pluto rising because we didn't have an exact time for this. But we did some digging into the archives of the IAU meetings, which they have online. Anyone
Ooh,
can look at them, which is interesting. And the meeting was actually between 2 and 4 p.m. local time on this day.
okay, wow.
So I just picked 3 because it's in the middle, and it happens to be a Pluto rising chart again, which is very interesting.
Very interesting. And it has Sagittarius as the ascendant. So
Yes.
again, the focus of why we're doing it, or what we're used, what the kind of the lens through which we're taking the thing that we're focusing on. So in this case, the vote for the IAU to decide whether or not to demote Pluto to Pluto, or to keep it as it has been since the inception of Pluto into our solar system, since its discovery in the 1930s, or maybe 1929. Is very much, it's like foreign focused. It's like philosophical. We're doing it by way of like, for like philosophy purposes, or based on these we believes, these like tenets that we are agreeing on at the time, because that has been the overriding like law of the land.
Mm-hmm.
And it is uh, that Sagittarius ascendant is dispositing Jupiter, and Jupiter is, oh my gosh,
In
where's Jupiter?
Scorpio.
And then Jupiter is in Scorpio, which is all about control. It's all about power, that which is it's so exacting, it's so powerful that you don't even know where it comes from. You just
Yeah.
feel the gravity of how much control it actually has. And it's
The
because you don't
most,
know where it's coming from, you don't know where it is, right? You can't find
yeah.
it, so you can't cut the head off the beast, you know? It is controlling it from beyond what can be seen.
Yeah. And the last time, just for people's reference, the most recent time that we had Jupiter in Scorpio, we had the Me Too movement.
Oh,
So
right.
Jupiter and Scorpio can be very revealing as far as things like that are going on, and how far up the chain or down the chain these things go, just like you were saying.
Wow,
So we
absolutely.
started looking at this, and then that became even more in support of our suspicions
Right.
that they did this when Jupiter was in Scorpio. That, like you said, is ruling the chart. So that's interesting in and of itself. The
It
one
really
thing,
is.
at least that I wanted to point out before we get into, the analysis of this and all of the dynamics that are happening, is it just happened to be when Pluto was approaching the area of the sky in Sagittarius known as the galactic center,
Right.
which is in those later degrees of Sagittarius, which is a supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy. And we did a little looking into this before, when we were doing the research for when we prepared for last week's episode to present this topic. And there are so many mythologies of ancient cultures that were very familiar with this part of the sky and the power of this part of the sky, and referred to this area as a highway of souls, like the gate to the underworld. So, demoting or taking the power away from the planet that rules the underworld, when it's pretty much acting as the gatekeeper in the sky at the moment of the transit and in the coming years after this happened, is very suspicious to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you said in the beginning, Pluto is the soul's will. So you're taking away the planet that is responsible for the soul's will as it's acting in its role in the part of the sky where it belongs, as the gatekeeper of the underworld.
Right.
So that to me was especially suspicious when I saw the degree that Pluto was when this happened. I'm like, oh, there's something way deeper going on here.
There is something so deep going on. There is also something, and it's so funny because I focused on so many other things the last time that we were, analyzing this together. But it is also not lost on me that Chiron, Ceres, Neptune, especially Neptune in Aquarius. To me, I'm really seeing this, especially with, I'm all of a sudden focused on the fact that this is very late in the game of the age of Pisces, right? And the late stage of age of Pisces, which we're still technically in, we're in the cross current of transitioning over to the age of Aquarius. So sometimes we're living on one timeline, sometimes we're living on the other timeline, sometimes we're feeling like we're having like schizoaffective disorder because we're having them at the same time, and it's creating a lot of like dissonance and glitchy kind of like perspective and stuff. But Neptune, the planet of both illusion, delusion, intuition, spiritual connection, and that which we're like intuiting as something that is like, like, I don't know. I kind of think of Neptune and Pisces synonymously with like, I'm intuiting what could divinely be, like I'm devising the possibilities of paradise from somewhere beyond my knowledge or scope. But also I could live in that delusion and have actually like absolutely no, there's no anchors into the ground with it. So I'm really seeing this, what is this? Neptune and Ceres together between 17 and 18 degrees in Aquarius. And then also the fact that Chiron is at 5 degrees of Aquarius, which is just within 2 degrees of where Pluto just stopped and went retrograde, right? In this current year. So what we're experiencing, it's like almost like this thing was timed to be like, and also Neptune and Pisces being, I'm hearing that line, that religion is the opiate of the people, right? And so we're like taking this time. I feel like this whole chart is around taking like Neptune. It's like they're devising the next religion. They're devising the next opiate of the people. And Aquarius is very scientific, innovation. It's literally like I'm hearing like innovation and like a very technical advancement. It's
or supernatural.
It's to me it's more like sci-fi than it is, or like it's scientific, and it's innovation and it's technology. To me, it's very like robotic in a way. Like I always think Aquarius is very robotic, and you can say this is we're actually like when you only think of Aquarius in that sense, you're kind of missing the fact that, oh, well, Aquarius is actually the opposite of Leo, which is like how you become your own rebel leader and you stop following the monarch. You stop following the lineage of power and the person that you're supposed to like that reigns over you, and you're like, actually I feel like the king within, and I don't need the pomp and circumstance to like let that be my guiding force. But when I see it in the context of this particular chart, I'm very much seeing like actually we're devising what is going to be the next, let's say 20 years, maybe even we're inserting this power so that we can have the age of Aquarius really be the age where technology, science, and technological innovation be the next religion, the opiate of the people.
And look what's happening right now.
And so what would be a great way to do that is demote the planet that actually represents the soul and the soul's will as like and the connection between and the power of surrender to the actuality, the inevitability of life, of birth, death, and rebirth, right?
Yeah.
And also like the planet that is talking about both like the physical and the spiritual alchemy that sex, death, and transformation, and like the act, and like I'm literally seeing like oh my gosh, now like I'm saying this out loud, I'm literally seeing that they are being like, okay, great, Neptune and this like, stage of whatever. Like, I'm literally seeing it as like, guess what, guys? Okay, on the horizon, humans will no longer have children anymore. We're gonna put robots in its place. Like, forget religion, forget all these things. They're obviously have like, they've like had their time. Now technology and scientific fact and scientific proof and all that kind of stuff is going to be the opiate of the people. What they didn't realize is like other technologies that would support the things that were being called for at the time, like independent news sources. So like the fact that everyone becomes their own correspondent, everyone goes from just being someone who gets informed by centralized news or media programming to we all become our own field correspondent, our own, whatever, our citizen journalist, right? So there is a flip side. There's always something to counter the intentions of those who are, are a institutional force or many people coming together to achieve something that is greater than the sum of its parts, right? And at the same time, this looks like to me, this is looking like a pretty, it's looking like intentional. It looks like this intentional demotion, which we have some numbers as to how many people that are officially part of the IAU. It was something in the vein of, there's like 10,000 professional astronomers that are a part of the IAU, or at least in some way part of this the pool for which they anticipated having members vote on this very profound and precedent forming demotion of Pluto. It's the first demotion that we've had of a planet in our solar system since we started the solar system, and certainly since we found all of the 9 members of the solar system, or planets rather, not obviously there's other things in our solar system. But the fact that I think the official number was like 431 members. There's 431 votes out of what was an anticipated or an eligible 10,000 votes or membership, right?
Yep.
I don't know.
This was not a popular.
I don't know the percentage.
This was not a popular thing.
It
was not very well supported. Yeah.
It wasn't, but it also wasn't very well. Like the vote itself wasn't very well attended. Like there were people that were. And I don't know how many of the people that didn't vote were doing it because they thought it was so unnecessary. They were like, there's no way that we would demote Pluto as a planet from our solar system. And then other people, I do know that some people that had written a lot of, the counter to the argument that Pluto should be demoted to a dwarf planet. Some of those people did choose not to vote because they were like they were protesting this vote. They're like, this is so beyond. But it didn't stop the machine from voting and just going ahead and demoting Pluto with only 431 votes in favor of demoting it.
Yeah.
I don't even think it was 431 votes in favor of demoting it. It was just 431 votes total. And then they had a slight, maybe even, 60% in favor. I don't even think it was as much as 60% in favor. But there I'm just speculating. All I know is that only 431 members of a 10,000 member pool voted. Mm-hmm. And whatever majority voted in favor of demoting Pluto from the solar system was pretty low. And we now, what do you call that when you uh, make someone like a knight, you know, we charge
Mhm.
you to go and do your own study, your own research, and find out who are the members of the IAU who voted in
And
favor
who
of,
funds them?
and who funds them. Exactly, who funds them. Because if there's anything that this time period could teach us, that was revealed to us later on, certainly within the next 2 years of the housing bubble bursting and the financial collapse and all these other things that were happening. I'm even thinking of the writer's strike and like the SAG union and everyone, that whole industry being on pause, because that's what I was graduating into also at the time that happened. And not only that had other kind of systemic power issues that also became the center focus, similar to how what we're focused, like, while we were all focused on foreign war and foreign policy and foreign this and foreign that, we had, we had 2 years of still, selling people, or a year and a half of still selling everyone subprime mortgages, while,
Mhm.
hedge funds and whatever are betting against the housing market because they know they can see the writing on the walls and stuff like that. Again, Pluto also and Scorpio very much being involved with the capital market system versus, tangible goods like food,
Yeah.
and all
And
that kind of
and
stuff.
I mean, look at the second house in the chart. That's all. I mean, that's what we're talking about as far as the illusion over and the disillusion over, the resources financially, everything that you just said. But then also too, this is right before. So Pluto shifted into Capricorn in 2008. So
Right.
they did this right before.
We
I
had the
mean,
shift.
it's coming. I mean, we've been able to track Pluto's orbit, since it was discovered decades before this.
Hmm.
So it's just fascinating to see how, and there's a seeding that's happening when this meeting was occurring and when this decision was made. Because when you and I first looked at this chart, it was like holy Virgo stellium. It was just after a new moon. So there's something kind of lurking in the shadows underneath what's happening when publicly they're doing this thing, like considering it like an act of service, but really on the other side of it, there's a lot that went in that was hidden, I think.
Yeah, and even like an applying uh, conjunction between Lilith and the South Node in the late degrees of Virgo,
Mm-hmm.
which is so, it has to be perfect. It has to be repeatable, procedural, tangible, of like, tangible good. And like you said, in service, there's like an over emphasis on practical service, almost to the
Mm-hmm.
point of in like enslavement. You know what I'm saying? You're like almost like
Yes.
enslaved to the public identity of service. But then also, if 3 o'clock is the exact time, and I'm sure there are some, we probably could tack on 10 minutes in either direction of that
Doesn't
time.
change the chart much.
Right. But also by going by the Placidus house system, um, there's an interception of Virgo and Pisces, which is an
Mm-hmm.
indication that what is real and what is fantasy is there's a broken access of objectivity and like cohesion between those two opposites. So there is almost like a co-opting of what is real and what is reality and what is fantasy, and executing on the person who holds a chart with that, if they can get it together, which by the way, I natally have a Pisces Virgo interception with very important like planets in it, for me. The hard thing is actually getting it together, but the main thing is the person who actually like doubles down on that. Well, I don't really have a good access, so it can't be dictated to me. What's real and what is fantasy is like
Mm.
can't be dictated to me from the outside, so I control it. Like I actually, I once I kind of dig into whatever needs to be shifted to externalize the internal process, or like get comfortable with my own internal process and start like throwing whatever at the wall, whenever you're spitballing or just trying to figure out something that works or whatever opens the magical, hidden doorway into actualizing. You actually control that access of what is real and what is not, what is fake or what is, fact and what is fantasy. And they got a lot of variables. They got a lot of energies in those two parts of the chart. And it just looks like someone doubling down on, we could just control what is practical, repeatable, buildable reality and refine it from there in what direction we want to take it. What serves our service persona. It's criminal. I'm fine. I'm I'm ready to sign a lawsuit. Like I'm ready.
I think that I'm ready made for the argument. Yeah, right. We've stirred up all the things that were our intuitions at first that were just proven. Like we could talk so much more about this chart. Can you touch on this question?
Okay, Chris Mack. Lilith is the external object which periodically touches on the periphery of the solar system, right? Sorry, I am foggy on my celestial specifics. So there are actually 3 kinds of Lilith. One is the lunar apogee, right? Like the dark, like it's a theoretical point that is like, it's kind of like the dark side of the moon, but it's the dark side of the lunation, like around, and then there's also an asteroid named Lilith. And then there is yet a third, kind of like aspect. I think, I don't know, on solar fire, which is what you use to generate this chart, right?
This one's Astro Gold.
Astro Gold. So, do you know if they're using the theoretical, like the lunar apogee or lunar apogee point?
I can find out.
Or if it's the asteroid. Either way, I like to kind of like take it very well may use a median, between like a composite of those, or at least of the apogee and the asteroid. But overall, if we need a definition of Lilith is, always go back to the mythology, always go back to the archetype. When we talk about Lilith, we are talking about the rejected feminine archetype that is rejected for because she is whole. She is whole. She is not like a counterpart. She is technically a counterpart to Adam, but she is made of the same stuff. So, the reason why Lilith becomes exiled from the story of the origin story of humanity, of civilization by way of the Abrahamic tradition, is because she refused to bow down to or submit to her counterpart, because she's not there to submit, she's there to be. And so that they are both forced to know more about themselves and to achieve whatever that they're here to achieve through the process of relating. And relating is a process of 2 sovereign, equals, they might be equal, but like with, complementary, skill sets or aspects of being. But balance is not a static state. It's something that constantly needs to be negotiated between 2 equals. And the very fact that Adam in the story is not seeing her or not regarding her as what she is, which is his equal. And he demands that she subject herself to his will. Some people say sexually, some people say like whatever. The whole point of the matter is she was like, I rather kick rocks, okay, than give up that which is most dear to me and what I was imbued by God, our creator, with, which is agency, my own agency. So it's when divine feminine gets the whole one, the one that doesn't have any missing parts. It doesn't have to be your mother, lover, child, whatever, in order to just be accepted and remain in its own wholeness and power. literally removes itself from human consciousness and the story of civilization, and is literally replaced with what I call the bootleg Eve, and who is made with Adam's rib and then the breath of God, and is not made from the ground and then the breath of God, the same as Adam was. And now, overall, that's really how the masculine, and yeah, you could say patriarchy, because we are talking about the Abrahamic tradition, inserts itself into the origin story of the feminine by completely discrediting and discounting the existence of when the feminine was regarded as what it actually came here as, which is its own powerful and fully actualized counter to the masculine, for purposes of relation, as well as, all kinds of stuff, procreation. There's tons of stuff for us to learn from one another, but you don't learn as much when you're not challenged, because you made something that was made from you out of your own insecurities and your own need to make things easy for yourself, because you just don't feel up to the task, or you don't think that you feel entitled to have it be easier for you. Evolution should be easier for me. Relating and being and living on Earth should be easier for me. So I'm going to do away with my actual challenge, my actual, I'm thinking even like the anima, relationship and psychology. I'm going to literally do away with that. And I'm going to literally create something from my own shadow and call it evolution. That's not evolution. That's actually that's how you get to where we are today, which is late stage capitalism, late stage patriarchy, late stage having been so disconnected from the actuals of things, because you have things like, which I really feel this Pluto getting Plutoed, i.e. the demotion of Pluto, is just a symptom. It's a symptom of it. It's like, this has been working, us, changing the goalposts, us like changing what is for something that is just like 17 degrees off of like, of like a fair, informed decision on something. Instead, it's like, it looks like it's the natural progression or evolution of it, but actually it's a curated one. And it's one that is meant to look like the natural progression. But in fact, it is an organized attack, or it is moving people, consciousness, power systems, etc., in a predetermined direction for a predetermined objective that has been decided on by few, that will control the many, right?
And look at the almost exact square in this chart between Pluto and Black Moon Lilith. 23 Sagittarius to 24, or 24 Sagittarius with Pluto, and 23 Virgo with Black Moon Lilith.
And the fact that
it was like built into the story.
It's built into the story. And also, if we go with the concept of it being Lilith, as well as all these other planets in Virgo being intercepted, along with the lunar nodes, which when you have interceptions of the lunar nodes in a natal chart, it means that the actual destiny of the chart holder is blocked. It is blocked until it is acted upon or found in a different place, either through the progression of time or the actual physical moving of the chart holder to a different location, where that which has been obscured or kind of like locked away or not made inaccessible become accessible by way of an environmental change.
And Pluto is squaring the lunar nodes in this chart also.
Pluto is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, this is such an attack. I hate this. This is like, this is almost like, it feels like if you want to learn how to like, how obscuring somebody's psychological / spiritual origins, if you can obscure them, then you can control them, because you're cutting them off from their own like lineage and knowingness and power and like anchor. And you can insert yourself into the story, and then you become the alpha and the omega of that person's like existence, or those people's, like story.
I think the opposition of Mercury and Neptune speaks to that in this chart as well. I
Oh yeah.
mean, Neptune opposing that whole cluster in Leo at the top in the 8th house of Venus, Saturn, and Mercury.
Yeah.
So that speaks to what you're saying too. And then also just to note, I put it on the chart just because it was available in the software, but the point opposite Pluto in this at 26 degrees Gemini is the asteroid Hades. So
Oh.
we actually had another chart prepared that has more of the family dynamics and the myth that we covered in part 2. I mean, we only have about 10 minutes left today. So I just wanted to point that out if anybody wants to kind of jump on that and start digging a little bit more into that asteroid and what that could mean. I'm not very much schooled on many of the asteroids, particularly Hades, but I put it in the chart just for demonstration purposes. And if anyone wants to kind of run with that and look at it more deeply.
So that is
invitation
Hades.
Is
that is actually
Hades.
Hades at 26 degrees, 20 minutes of Gemini in the 7th house.
In the 7th house.
That is exactly square to the intercepted lunar nodes in this chart. This is gross. Like, I'm like, this is getting worse. Like, I know that we've done this a couple of times off air, but like, ew, like if you guys want to know like what the actual like something is, it is like, and it's kind of sad. I like kind of was having a bit of like a walking meditation about Hades actually being kind of like an incel, you know, because like, but until he decides to take a wife, a child bride. Yeah, to take a child bride so he could have one, not because he was necessarily, you know, a highly like, I mean, it's weird to like rule sex, you know, and I mean like Pluto like ruling sex, but like it's like sex in terms of domination. It's not like sex for fun and folly, like Leo 5th house kind of thing, you know, like knowing that I'm you know, have a creative force inside me, that same creative force is both creative and procreative, right? That's like very Leo 5th house energy. Well, yeah, so then it moves to the, you know, 8th house, like Scorpio, and now we're not having like sex for fun and folly, or like, you know, I feel like my heart is telling me to do this. It's like, no, I need to dominate something. I need to make sure that my seed, you know, gets, you know, carried on through the lineage of, you know, humanity, you know. I really just cannot, but like also Hades, and I have actually the definition of Hades in terms of the asteroid. It says Hades is associated with such negative conditions and substances as poverty, ugliness, garbage, dirt, sickness, bacteria, loneliness, debasement, vulgarity, and crime. So crime is a huge aspect of this. And of course, we're not talking, you know, you don't give asteroids the same weight, right, in a chart when you're doing an analysis. They are things that finely tune. There's things that like lead you to a more nuanced understanding or coloration of what these larger kind of things are. But again, we are talking about the demotion of Pluto, which even demoting Pluto from a planet to a dwarf planet would, in essence, say, in theory, that it should have less cred or less pull. But it's actually the thing that's like pulling everything. Like it's pulling the strings of everything. It is like the tectonic shifts. It's the thing promoting like the tectonic shifts, dictating them from beyond the scope of human like awareness, not just awareness, our ability to comprehend, you know, from beyond human comprehension. Okay. It also says that Hades rules or is connected with past lifetimes, the overall ancient past, secrets, and certain combinations can even represent ancient wisdom and older sciences. This is a hypothetical planet, technically, and can have positive meanings, particularly when found in horoscopes of individuals who deal with such Hades matters, such as healing of disease. And based on the speculative orbits of Uranian planets, the Kepler, Solar Fire, and Wind Star software system will locate this hypothetical planet in an astrological chart for you. So that didn't tell us very much at the very end, other than the fact that, it literally rules ancient past secrets and everything. You know what this is giving me? It's giving me when I had the realization that, and this is like, when I had the realization that all the bad, like everything bad happens in Gemini because everything, because I'm thinking of like the age I'm thinking of the age of Cancer and how that's like really where we rebooted humanity and civilization through these learning and the processing of matristic, power systems and stuff like that. So there wasn't hierarchy. Everyone gets fed. We're rebooting humanity after anywhere from 2,000 to possibly 6,000 years or 4,000 years from the last. We're within a couple thousand years from the last great cataclysm that wiped out most just living everything, not just humans. So the 2,100 years roughly of the age of Cancer, we get back into being able to not just sustain, but there's like enough of us that like we have a human collective going again. We're not just like here and there. But then instead of taking that which we learned about learning how to be in community, how to be receptive of of everyone, that everyone has a place in the community and everyone has a job and everyone's like beingness is contributing to the overall sense of comfort and security of not just the community but also like all of humanity. And instead we back into Gemini, which we start having written word, not just written word, but standardized writing. And instead of using this new, codification of language to communicate all that we learned in the past 2,100 years, where we literally were amazing we actually learned how to reboot humanity and like live in peace with each other and know that the knowingness of mother is how we survived what was almost total annihilation of the human whatever. We completely we start using the codification of language and writing it down as a control tool, as to control what is written down and therefore passed on to other, into the generations to come, versus what gets left out. And we kind of we leave home behind. We leave home behind in favor of travel and gossip and commerce, and then being controlling who can read and who can write and what is written and what isn't. It becomes what dictates the rest of what humans think is our history. It's so ugly. I feel like Hades being in that late degree of Gemini is and squaring the lunar nodes of this Pluto demotion chart is giving me, this is where the ancient wisdom and ancient past and ancient secrets, this is the exact point of that evolutionary tale, maybe even karmic point of this Pluto chart that the whole chart is addressing.
And we harken back to our original intention that we started off with introducing for why we're doing the show. So yeah.
It's because we have to rebuild the cat. We have to acknowledge that there was a temple of divine feminine and spiritual access, art, everything, for all of us to become not just initiated into, but to become aware of and to learn about it, to hone it and to integrate it and to use it for ourselves. But but when there's a hostile takeover of such things, then, the ones of us that remember it are really afraid to say anything about it. And the ones of us that were uninitiated go on thinking that they know everything, and they get really, it's really easy when you have that level of self, what do you call that? It's more than just self-confidence. It's it's I don't know, it's delusional, but it's also highly effective. When you don't feel like you're disintegrated, that there's any aspect of you that's not being left out, you feel very whole and very convinced that your way is the way, your history or your concept of reality is the concept, the capital T truth, And we're here to tell you there are more than just the day and moment of Pluto's demotion from the solar system
Yeah.
that
Yeah. So today,
are really looking like strategic attacks on what came
yes.
before to further disconnect us from what came before at a very opportunistic time to kind of have people's attention, the collective attention on other things so that we didn't see what was happening in the pipeline. And by the time it happens, none of us are, most of us are trying to make sure that our, house isn't underwater in terms of it, it being worth nothing.
Or recovering from a layoff that happened during the housing market crash in 2008.
Right. Or graduating into a recession with a BFA, that kind of thing,
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah,
today's episode was a presentation, but it was also an invitation to,
right.
if you have an intuition like Elise did about something like this, dig a little deeper. There's plenty of information out there. You could always just look at the chart. I mean, if there's things that have been censored or you can't get access to any of the information, and we just happen to be able, through 5 minutes of digging, find the sessions and the notes and the schedule from the IAU back, over almost 10 years ago. So just look for yourself. If you've got an intuitive hit or a vision or something like that about something, just explore.
Just check it out. Exactly.
That's how we reinitiate and reconstruct the temple.
Right, because we need everyone's eyes and everyone's intuition to then lead them to what aspect of to further find and to expand on their lowercase truth, right, from their perspective, so that it can get thrown into the middle so that we can all absorb it and recompile or get to the closest approximation of what the capital T truth actually is from all angles of the human circle. And yeah, even just the fact that the IAU, now this has gotten me super obsessed with the fact that it was formed in 1919, which the reason why I always remember about the World Series being rigged in 1919 is from reading The Great Gatsby. And I last week had the very good fortune of being able to go and see The Great Gatsby musical on Broadway. And they, I was so glad that they actually used that, that line in the book, because I always remember it as one of the characterizing lines of the book, where the narrator is actually talking about how to describe the nature of the time, the character of the time in which the story is opening up at. He is talking about it as its proximity to, whether it's like the same year or the year after, that the World Series was rigged by, in front of everyone, like under the very nose of everyone. So in order to describe where we were at in terms of a society, it was like Arnold Rothstein, rigged the World Series. And that was, they were, without saying it was a Wild West, a new level of Wild West in terms of, post-industrial, post-World War I, pre-economic crash of the end of the 1920s. Obviously, he's not getting that far ahead of us, but 1919 always stands out in my mind as, oh, wow, that's where we were. And the fact that the IAU is something that came out of that time period is like super extra suspect, especially it being an international organization after the end of the First World War, the Great War, is saying a lot. That's when all of these kind of like unions and stuff like that were put in place so that we could have a consensus as to where we go as a one world. It's giving me very one world.
Yes.
Ew. I don't like it. Yeah. We need if anyone has any leads on, do we have a counter to this IAU and who runs that, when that was started? We're looking to find out if that exists. So
yeah. So we're a little over time. I think we should wrap up for today. Just to touch on this, Chris Mack, that is absolutely significant. It is not background noise. Continue joining us for Wax Hermetic live on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern to learn more. And we can get into questions maybe next week, because next week we're discussing Ophiuchus.
Oh yes, we were discussing what many of you may have heard of as the 13th zodiac
13.
sign. And yeah, it is significant, although there is a reason why it is not in the 12, it is not included in the 12 zodiacs yet, but we will get into that. Chris Mack, I am just going to touch on that. That means that you are what is known as a early millennial or a Gen Y person, which I am too. And without getting too much into the astrology of it, what I would say is that we're actually here, but we're here to actually embody the death and rebirth cycle of things, and we are the ones that are like, yeah, we stop fearing death because every single system that we've ever been like taught or fed has literally collapsed before our eyes during our coming of age, and consistently does so. So the fact of the matter is, there's got to be like, you got to embody that, and also being so integral in terms of the fact that because this like part of the death is like acknowledging what came before as total fact, and there's kind of like there's like the death of that actuality too, that like was fake also. I think it's really important that especially early early Scorpio Pluto people recognize how significant it was to be like the last generation that's like right in the middle of, like, when I heard that like part of what's going on the earth now is the fact that there's half the people on the planet that are alive that take what happens physically in real life, as their primary reality, and then there's half of the people on the planet that take what they see online or through a digital medium as their primary reality. And the first half is getting smaller and the second half is getting larger. And the Pluto, especially the early Pluto, the early Scorpio Pluto people are the last people to have had exactly 50-50 of their development experience in a fully analog world, and then what becomes a fully digital one by the time you're, of age to, let's say, drink, like, I'll even give you a few years and beyond the 18, but most people having a personal computer, some kind of access to the internet, starting by the time you're in middle school. Some people before, a lot of people having it at least being taught to you in school, around that kind of midway point. That's what it means to. I hope that instead of you focusing on the shittiness of that, but like, it seems like a really raw deal. It's like, oh wait, I hope you use it to embody the absolute power of Pluto, that kind of placement of Pluto has, which is, there is so much power in my existence and my experience of life on Earth right now that is resonant, that actually has a resonance with the entire like collective of humanity and why I'm here. So doing things that impel you, or like however you are impelled to share what you know about having that 50-50 analog to digital understanding or acceptance, or like having to embody like the imbalance, or having to literally break away from a either or paradigm and be the embodiment of surrendering to the fact that we live in a both and paradigm. That actually is like, you can actually use that as a very powerful tool to create, to self-initiate, to bring truth to power, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you do have to get out of the victim mentality that, oh, I've just been walking through tower moments my entire life. In fact, my whole generation is a tower moment in humanity. Kind of sucks, but it's actually really empowering. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us here for Wax Hermetic. We will be back next week at 12 p.m. Eastern time with another episode. This one focusing on the sign that is archetypally in between Scorpio, but before you get to Sagittarius. Because how do you get from the underworld back up above ground onto your soapbox of Sagittarius?
Yeah, and you can also catch exactly. So we will be covering that next week. And if you can't watch live, absolutely catch the replay. It'll be there right after the show ends. And right now into the middle of December, we have live shows on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesday is Blast from the Past, and we are Wednesday Wax Hermetic, and Friday is Olhe. So we have a few more weeks going with our live shows, and then we'll be on a little bit of a break. But you can always catch the replay if you can't catch us live. And definitely also go to astronomistus.com. Booking a reading will help you learn so much more about your Pluto and other placements in your natal chart. So you can go there for that. And then for today, we'll wrap up. Elise, will you ring us out?
Yes,
please?
I will. And everyone have a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.